Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I thought I would take just a moment to make a video about when to fly. Quite often, I'm always asked, hey, is it good flying weather today? Or when's the next time we're going to be able to fly? Or even worse, sometimes I see or hear about people flying in conditions that are just simply not very good conditions to fly in. So, what I thought I would do is I'd make a little video and show you exactly how I go about checking the weather, seeing if it's good flyable weather, and in just my approach on how I start. When I first started studying the weather, I found a website that was not what just came out many years ago, and then it became really popular amongst people who are flying. But that's a website called windy.com, www.windy.com. Now, this is a cool website because you can do so many things. It's so customizable, and plus it's got a really cool graphic. So no matter where you look, you can look all across the United States and see where it's flyable. The color coding is really nice because if you're in areas of red, that's high winds. If you're in the areas of blue, then that's low wind. So it gives you a really quick visual of where good wind is. Not only that, if you look at the bottom, you can scroll through and it'll show you, what it predicts for the coming days. Um, and also, I've got this little button down at the bottom right-hand corner turned on where it says reported wind. So that's not just a prediction, that's actual wind and their direction from local uh, weather weather stations in our area. Now, one thing before we go any further, you need to understand is when it comes to predicting the weather or predicting wind forecasts and things of that nature, there are tons of different computer models that are out there. Some of them are more accurate in certain parts of the United States than others. When I first started, I found that the GFS model was pretty good. However, what I found out is that it's not got, I mean, it's kind of very broad. So a lot of times it takes a lot of averages. It's not very detailed in the timing and or the local area. So I don't just use one because there's never just one computer model that will work for everything. So, but my go-to is the ECMWF, and it usually is pretty good. Now, a lot of the really good computer models is not free. Some of the models that come on certain sites you is free. Some of it you have to actually pay for. But and a lot of times when I get really detailed, like if it's questionable, if I come up on a day where I really want to fly, but the computer model that I'm looking at the time is not showing favorable winds, a lot of times I'll check the other computer models just to try to find something that may work for us. But anyway, back to the windy.com website. It's really cool because you can click around any location in which you're wanting to fly, and it'll basically tell you at a specific time. Let's say I want to go fly tomorrow at 6 p.m. Because the sun is currently setting around 7:40 p.m. So I'm looking at this model and I'm seeing really good colors. I'm seeing blues and purples, and I'm looking here. Let's say I want to fly over around the Hazel Green area. Uh, then when I click on here, it shows 2 miles an hour. Now that 2 mile per hour uh, number is on the surface. What I really like about this website is you can look and it'll give you the wind prediction at various different altitudes. So a couple of things that you'll notice, this got a little graphic, a moving animation, if you will, these little dots that are moving. It shows you the wind direction. So sometimes people just look at surface winds to determine whether or not it's going to be good flying. But you also need to look at winds aloft, like at the 1,000-foot level or the 2,000-foot level. And not only that, but if you're at, let's say you check the winds at 2,000 feet, look at the direction of the wind because as wind flows through the air, it may go at different directions according to how high you are. And that's a very dangerous situation. If you get into wind shear situations, then it doesn't matter if it's even if it's relatively low winds, you're still going to have a really bumpy and uncomfortable ride. And sometimes it can be actually dangerous if it's the higher winds aloft. One thing that I've noticed over the years, particularly in our area, is that oftentimes when you look at a wind forecast, you can also find a gust forecast. And oftentimes that gust forecast, that gust number, is usually the same number as the wind is, say, 1,000 or 2,000 feet. And that's simply because the wind from above sometimes reaches down and it will create gusting situations on the surface. So just understand this, when you look at surface winds, it only tells you a small portion of the information that you need to know, okay? So this is one thing that I'll do. Now I'm looking at Tuesday tomorrow, and it's looking really good. As a matter of fact, in this particular week, today was not a good day to fly because we were getting like 13-mile-an-hour gust, 7 to 13, things of that nature. So, I mean, you could fly in that situation, but if you're a new pilot, I would not risk it because you're gonna create a situation that you're gonna have to really manage and active fly. So particularly if you're a beginner, be very aware. I would not go above 10-mile-an-hour winds as a beginner until you get a little bit more skilled in your handling ability of your wing. So this is the website. Now it does a lot of things. I'm just going to try to keep it to the basics for right now. And I used the website religiously when I first started flying, but what I found out was there's a ton of great apps for your phone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just show you all of the apps that I have on my phone. Now, I've got a whole page of apps. I don't use them all, anymore. I've really kind of narrowed it down to 3. And if you'll look, there's one in the bottom left-hand corner. It's called Wind Alert. That's my number one go-to that I have. You just put in your location, and sometimes I'm kind of close to Decatur. So what I'll do is I'll just click on Decatur. Now on this app, you can get the free version, which I think this is the free version. I have paid for the pro version, and it gives you a lot more detailed information. If you really start to study weather, you start geeking out on it. It gives you a lot of extra information. But the first thing I like to see is the graph at the top shows you the current wind as at the local station. So I see today it was about 10-mile-an-hour winds. It's kind of up and down, but it was still a little, a little high winds there. And then below it shows you the forecast. So on these graphs here, it shows Monday that it was basically around flight time, it was 8 gusting 13, which again, for a beginner, I would not recommend going out in these conditions. It was just a little bit gusty. A lot of things can happen in a gusty situation. So I would not risk it as a beginner in these wind conditions. But if you scroll over to Tuesday, you'll see that around the good flight time, always as a beginner, I would always only fly the first hour and the last hour of the day. Now, as your skill increases and you start getting really comfortable in the air and you get many hours, logged in the air, then you can start looking at maybe going a little bit earlier. I still don't fly before an hour before sunset, simply because, I can fly it. I can control my glider. It's just not fun to me. I want to relax. I want to get up there in some smooth air, fly around, not have to active pilot everything. So I always just first hour of the day, if I go in the morning, or the last hour of the day. So I'll take the sunset and go back exactly 1 hour. And exactly 1 hour around here is when all the winds start settling down. If you look on Tuesday, tomorrow, from 6 to 7, it's showing 2 and 2 or 1 and 1. And that's going to be the absolute best flying you will ever have, most likely. And sometimes it's a little bit too good for beginners because you have no winds. And if the winds are like 1 or 2, sometimes they'll start shifting around. So you have to be very careful about the direction that you're going. And it also makes for really fast runs for takeoffs and really, fast landings. But those are my favorite because the air is just butter smooth. And so I'll go over here and look at Wednesday, and Wednesday looks absolutely perfect. 2 to 3, can't ask for better conditions. Now, just because the forecast says that this is what's going to happen, that does not mean that that's actually going to happen. So the best thing for you to do is get to the field early, put up your windsock, get a little streamer that shows just a little bit of air, and then just observe the wind. Um, no matter, don't ever trust a wind forecast, because sometimes the wind forecast will show really bad conditions and it's actually really good. Sometimes it'll show really good conditions and it's actually not that great. But anyway, I love this app. It does a lot of stuff for you. There's many other things that you can check out. Here's another one. If you want to know what the wind is above, which is really important. I told you that if you've got winds going in different directions at upper altitudes, not a good condition. Unless you get up into like we never really fly that high. So I kind of ignore it when it gets up to about 5,000 feet and up. I don't really pay attention to that so much. It doesn't really affect the altitude in which I fly. But this app is called Winds Aloft, and what it does is it shows you in real quick a glance how fast the winds are aloft. It shows right here that the surface is 4 knots, but at 1,000 feet it's 14. At 2,000 feet it's 13. But I also look at the degrees, and this is actually not too bad. 149 degrees at surface, 163. That's not too much. So I'm not really too concerned with wind shear. But again, let me reiterate, even if the winds are low and you have like different contrasting directions of the wind, you really want to be very careful. And if you get up in the air and you start getting rocked around and everything, you might want to consider to land. All right, and then the third app is very top right-hand corner, Media Blue. I guess that's how you pronounce it. This is one of my favorite ones too. If you click on the top left-hand corner, you go to these mediagrams. As a matter of fact, this is when I first started using apps for my phone. This was the app that I used because I loved this graph right here. I can look at this graph and tell immediately the blue line is the winds. This is all surface winds, and then the little gray line above it, that's the gust prediction. And the closer those two get together, the better the flying is going to be. Now, I will say over the years, this particular Mediagram, and what it does, it's my understanding, it doesn't just use one computer model. It uses a variety of different computer models, and it averages them all together. So you need to kind of keep that in mind as well, because some computer models will get way off and it will affect the overall data that comes into this particular app. Sometimes I take the gust figures with a grain of salt, but you can look through here and see, I really think the rest of the week, until things change, looks really good for flying. So that's something that you can do at a really quick glance. And of course, it gives you all kinds of different graphs and information. If you scroll all the way down right here, this is a concern of mine at the bottom of this graph. And it shows basically, let me see if I can blow up on this. All of these different colors represent different computer models. And so what happens is, see, today, Tuesday, or actually tomorrow, Tuesday, you see all of the colors are all together. That means it's a pretty predictable day. There's no question that what's going to happen is going to happen because all of the computer models agree. But if you look over here at Wednesday, they're all over the place. And if it can't determine the wind direction, it also usually is pretty inaccurate with the wind speeds and stuff. So understanding the computer models and how accurate or how confident they are in their computer model predictions is also another important thing. Of course, you always want to check the weather the day of, because 24 hours, things can change and quite often change. Oftentimes I'll tell the guys in our group of flying, I'll say, hey, the next flyable day is next Thursday. But then just like tomorrow, like 3 days ago, all week was showing that it was horrible flying weather. However, we came in today. Today's not very good, but as of right now, the rest of the week looks like it's flyable weather. Now that could change tomorrow. So really 24 hours is much more predictable than, of course, 72 or 96 hours out. So that's another thing to consider. So these are the apps. There's one other app. Let's see. Those three, I showed you those three. Oh, just for funsies, this doesn't really have anything to do with the wind forecast, but there's an auto dims right here. It shows you your it shows you what the density altitude is. And you have to refresh this because a lot of times there's a lot of factors that go into the lift of your wing. When it gets really hot and humid, the density altitude will go way up and it'll feel like you're flying at a high altitude. And that's what that density altitude is. So you just need to be aware, and that helps you predict whether or not it's going to be a really fast run or a fast landing and things of that nature. Anyway, these are, I know I was going to make this video really short. I was going to try to make it very basic and brief, but I kind of get excited about when I talk about weather, and there's actually a little bit more to it than this, but these are the basic things. So if you're a beginner pilot in our area, understand location is really important. When you get over to, let me show you on the map here real quick. But if you are over in the mountain area of Huntsville, anything above 5 miles an hour or so, these mountains will create a lot of rotor and it'll just create a bumpy situation. Oftentimes I'll not fly over on the east side unless it's just absolute perfect conditions. When the winds, even aloft, come over the top of those mountains, it'll create rotor and it'll push that fast air down to the surface. So you'll get a lot of rocky conditions. So if you notice over here, you've got a lot of mountainous ranges and things of that nature over here. My favorite place to fly is over here in the flatlands, where even if there's over in Athens, this is the absolute best. But even when it's windy over in the flatlands where there's no hills creating rotor, it still can create some smooth flying conditions. All right, so that turned out to be a pretty long video. I hope it was interesting to you. I've got more to share. Hopefully we can have some live events where if you have any questions about the weather, you can ask it. Anyway, I hope that helps. Talk to you soon.